Ozempic, it's in the news. Ow! Can I get sued for that? Either way, it's in the news because of doctors. Because even though obesity is one of the leading health issues in the country, impacting 42% of adults, a very small amount of doctors are fully trained to treat it. With, for example, a 2020 survey finding that medical schools spend an average of 10 hours on obesity education, and most are not in a hurry to increase it. And places like Axios noting that under 1% of the country's physician workforce has actually been certified by the American Board of Obesity Medicine, which is a startling figure when weight loss drugs like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro are exploding in popularity. I mean, back in May, Novo Nordisk said that 25,000 people are starting Wegovy every single week. And a lot of the people taking these drugs might not feel like they're getting the help that they need with them, because as it turns out, they're incredibly finicky and impact everyone differently. With seeing things like an obesity doctor telling Axios that there's just a lot of room for error in prescribing them because patients are supposed to be monitored while on them, right? And their doses and the side effects, they need to be managed, as do diet and exercise plans. Right? You can't just do the injection and call it a day. It's not that easy. And if an untrained doctor is not giving the right support and the patient in turn is using the drug wrong, it can actually make the problems worse, right? Because the side effects with these drugs, they can be wide-ranging if they're not managed. A fair amount of patients, they deal with nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation. You have others dealing with fatigue. Studies have also found small amounts of people just can't tolerate the drug and they have to stop. And then on top of all that, because there have been shortages of the drug, some people have to go on and off of it or fluctuate their dosage. And that is just this whole other thing to deal with and monitor. With Northwestern Medicine obesity specialist Robert Kushner telling Bloomberg there's a lot of hand-holding when it comes to prescribing these drugs and a lot of tweaking as time goes on. And you also had Lydia Alexander, the president of the Obesity Medicine Association, further explaining to Axios that patients likely require more specialized attention than they might be getting, saying as obesity becomes advanced and the conditions around it become more serious, it's harder to manage in a very busy primary care setting. And adding that primary care doctors, they need more training on obesity prevention and management, as well as saying the healthcare system at large needs more specialists for severe cases. Right, that way, primary care can handle it up to a point, but refer to a specialist when needed. And unfortunately, because a lot of people on these drugs feel like they're not getting the help that they need from the doctor's office, it ends up not being a surprise that they're turning to places like TikTok. Bloomberg noting this is especially the case from the growing number of people who are getting the drugs from telehealth companies, with many of them not providing much in service beyond putting the drugs in your hands. And I mean, some of the people are just left in the dark, with one doctor saying he's seen patients who ended up in the hospital from dehydration because they weren't told they need to drink more water on the medications. And some people haven't only found themselves with a lack of guidance, but with doctors who gave them potentially bad advice. Like one woman who said her primary care physician suggested she treat her nausea with a drug called Zofran, even though that drug could likely worsen the constipation she already had. So she just ended up managing it with tips she learned online. And so we saw Bloomberg speaking to Jennifer Witherspoon, who's built a following of people who turn to her for advice on managing the side effects of weight loss drugs. And this, even though she's not a medical professional, but as she explained, I'm known as like the side effect girl. People have offered to pay me, begged me to start a podcast, asked me to call their sisters-in-law, wanted me to call their doctor. One lady even invited me to her wedding. She's a Mounjaro user herself, and as Bloomberg explained, her content is filling a void for a lot of people. And Witherspoon saying that many of the people who come to her, they got these drugs from non-obesity specialists, or people like OBGYNs who never told them what foods or behaviors could impact them. It feels like it should go without saying, but medical professionals do not advise people to get their information on TikTok or social media, because misinformation can just thrive there. And there are cases where these online communities might be touting tricks that are unproven. Though, some doctors do say that a lot of the advice is positive. And in the case of someone like Witherspoon, she reminds people that she isn't a doctor, just someone with their own personal experience. And still, a lot of people actually prefer to get their information from peers or online, especially if they've had bad experiences with the healthcare system in the past. Which, if you talk about people who have used the healthcare system and people wronged by the healthcare system, I think it would almost be a circle. But also, notably, people with obesity and weight issues often have an especially bad go in the healthcare system. Right? Weight stigmas exist everywhere, but they are very apparent in medical settings. So we end up seeing things like a 2019 survey of Canadian physicians finding that 33% feel frustrated with patients who have obesity, 27% believe that patients with obesity are often non-compliant with treatment recommendations, and 18% indicated feeling disgusted when treating a patient with obesity. And while other studies found that higher weight patients often have shorter appointment times, they get less patient-centered communication, and that doctors with weight stigmas often attribute a patient's issues to their weight without fully examining them or interrogating the problem, which, can help you see why a lot of people are skeptical about doctors. And so when it comes to these new Ozempic-era drugs, and you add in the fact that most aren't trained in obesity, you can see how a patient's frustrations might add up quickly. And with that, we're seeing the doctors seeing these online conversations happening and these support groups on TikTok, and they actually want to be a part of them, especially those who do have expertise in obesity, because they want to make sure that people who have turned to social media are getting good information. With Daniel Rosen, a surgeon and obesity specialist who has over 58,000 followers, saying it's the next frontier, right? And explaining how he posts videos or responds to comments in between seeing patients. With all this, if you're someone that's on the medication or you know someone that's on the medication, what has the experience been? Does this sound like it rings true to you? And for everyone else, of course, I'd just love to know your thoughts here.